This is my talk for DevNation. It's called Putting the M in MBaaS. If that's not the talk you intend to see, this is your last chance to leave, kind of like what they say on the airplanes. This is your last opportunity to deplane. So just quick, a little bit about myself. My name's Jay Balunas. I've been at Red Hat now for a little over 8 years, and unfortunately I've kind of gone to the dark side. I'm now officially an engineering manager. I do still try to stay as technical as I can. So in a previous life, I founded a few open source projects. I've led a couple others and been involved with various open source efforts for quite a while. And I've been involved with mobile now for about 5 years. And that's a little bit about me. So let's talk a little bit about MBaaS, right? Mobile backend as a service. How many people here have heard of the term before? All right, good. So about half the room. That's good. So basically, if you saw Kian Clark's talk earlier today, he did a really good overview of the Red Hat mobile application platform, and he covered basically the whole breadth of the platform. I'm going to focus more specifically on the client side of it, and that's really because if you look at MBaaS, right, where's the M? The M is right up front, right? And I'm a little biased, but I think there's a reason for that, and that's really because mobile has kind of transformed software development and transformed the way people interact with one another, right? And it's one of those things where it's not called backend as a service. It's called mobile backend as a service, and some people call that maybe a marketing term, but it's something that is very widely used, and it's fundamentally changed, like I mentioned, the way people interact with one another. Now, it's also made a huge impact, obviously, in the business world, which is probably why most of you guys are here, right? And as a manager, they told me I had to have a slide that showed something going up and to the right, so everything's growing, and some logos of companies, right? So that's kind of my obligatory slide for that. So this is where I'm going to talk very quickly about the Red Hat mobile application platform itself. It's really a complete platform. It covers all of the client side, which is what we're going to talk about primarily, server side, lifecycle management, security, we've got a build farm, lots of different things. So credential management, backend integration, things like that. And you're going to hear over multiple talks this week, you're going to hear about different aspects of it. You're going to hear about the Openshift container platform, right? And all of the things that brings to the table and why that's important. You're going to hear about containers, and you're going to hear about modularity, and you're going to hear about management of those, right? And you're going to hear about scaling and elasticity and pod management and how to handle things like, for example, if a pod falls over, like clearly happened in that situation, how are those pods going to get restarted for you and spun up? Right, so that you maintain that the front end. You're also going to be hearing about various products and technologies and projects and things like that for backend integration, right? JBoss Fuse and others, API management, all of those things. But I'm happy to say that I'm not going to talk anymore about any of that, right? That's a different talk. So I'm going to focus specifically on the mobile aspects, and there's 3 main areas that I'm going to talk about. So one is going to be our client SDKs and what we support there, the different APIs we support through the different platforms. We're going to talk about our build farm. This is where you can send off a build job from any operating system and basically get back logs in a binary, right? So you can kick off different jobs, and you'll notice Windows and BlackBerry are trying to keep up. They kind of lost the ride a little bit, but we're also going to talk about native mobile push and the unified push server and why that's important. So, and really to bring all of these different things together, I want to talk about the templates that we have as a project that really kind of help you get started and are a great way to kind of learn a lot of these technologies and jump in. So with that, we're going to jump into our first demo, and they're all going to kind of be related. So let me turn on mirroring quickly. And I'm going to jump over to our platform. So this is the landing page of the Red Hat mobile application platform. When you log in, this is what you're going to see. And I'm just going to click on projects here. And again, I'm not going to cover too much of like all those squares. I'm not really getting into a lot of those. Those will be covered in other talks. But I am going to talk about when you click on new project here. This is our list of different templates that we have. Everything from hello world, push notification, all the different client types, which is really neat. You can kind of dig into new and different technologies, all the way to like SAML, form support, all of those different things. Now we're going to be using one of these later, and so I'm going to actually kick that off and start one. So I'm going to use the push notification starter template, and I'm just going to say template. And a couple things I want you to notice about this, right? So there's the cloud application. So this is basically the server side that all of these different client apps are going to talk to. And then you can see checkbox is on the right. What kind of clients do you want this app to have, right? Cordova, Xamarin, Android, right? All of these different options. You can even get a little screenshot of the different dependent hello droid. So I'm going to go ahead and just click create on that one. Oh, wrong button. There we go. So now it went down to the bottom, and now what the platform is actually doing for you is it's making a copy of all of those Git repositories, setting those all up so that it's one environment for you guys, and then you'll be able to interact, Git clone, pull these things down, interact with them, and then you'll see kind of push them back up. While that's kind of generating and building, I'm going to jump back over to the presentation quick and move on to the next aspect of it. I'll kick this off. There we go. My little presenter view. Perfect. All right, so we're going to talk about client SDKs and what we have available there. It's important to note that these are all open sourced. They're up on GitHub, FeedHenry, and you can fork them, play with them, and all of those types of things. So here's a list, and I'm not going to go through all of these, of all of the versions that we support of all these different APIs in iOS, Android, Cordova. We even have some accelerator support in Xamarin. And one thing we're really trying to do is keep up as these things change, right? I don't know how many of you know Android N was just announced, and it has some versions already out, and iOS 10 is on its way, right? So we work hard to kind of maintain those and keep those up to date. So now, how many here have actually written and created native mobile applications before? All right, so a little less than half of the room. So in order to kind of help everybody get started, we have, for each one of the client SDKs, we actually have kind of a really good getting started page. I'm actually going to go right to it, to one of them. So if you go to this page, wow, love that. Got to work on that CSS, I guess. And what you'll see for each and every one of these is a download page that I clicked by accident. Page not found, that's awesome. So basically what you'll see is the download for the SDKs, sample app, and really everything you need to know to get started at a beginning level, right? So how to set up, for example, Gradle builds for Android, or user permissions that you need to set, things like that. And that's really for each client SDK type that we have. And I clicked on that by accident again. There we go. All right, so now that we've kind of gotten ourselves started, let's talk about the first thing we actually have to do when we're using the SDKs. And that's we have to call an initialization step. And what this does a few things for us. It's going to configure client connections. It's going to set up some things for analytics and other things like that. I'm going to show you guys. I think our docs are have quite a bit of content in them and are really quite useful for kind of getting started, right? So this has all the details around the initialization SDK, but better yet, I think it also, I really think it's great that it also has these the different coding options for the different platforms, right? So whether you're using JavaScript with Apache Cordova, Android, it's going to show you what you need for each one of those. And for a little bit of information on what that does, the initialization, it's going to put together and package some of this metadata and send it back to the platform. But one thing it's going to do, and it's actually really pretty neat, it's an interesting feature of the platform, is that it's going to phone home and it's going to say, what backend should I use? So the initialization call is going to call back to the main platform and say, where should I go for all of my new calls? And I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the backend much, but the reason this is so important and why it matters to client developers is because if you can dynamically change where your APIs are pointing to, you don't need to update your client app as often, right? So one of the biggest problems that a lot of mobile native developers run into is how do I get people to update their application when I've made a change, right? And so what this does is this allows you, now listen, you're still going to have to update your app sometimes, but not necessarily just for changing servers or migrating to a new cluster or something like that, right? You can handle a lot of that dynamically this way. It also is really useful, by the way, as far as the dev, test, and kind of production deployments, so you can kind of point different things to different ways like that. All right, next up, we've got our app initialized, but now what we need to do is actually get it secured, right? Because that's obviously one of the important things we need to have happen, right? So our SDKs and our platform support SAML, LDAP, OpenID through Keycloak, and also OAuth. Now, any of you that's played with this stuff, OAuth takes a little bit more to get configured and set up, but I'm going to show you some of the APIs here as conference Wi-Fi slows down. Come on. There we go. So this basically is a configuration for your, on the client side, for your authorization. And again, this is going to click the wrong thing. And this is going to have all the details you need, the different supported platforms, and then what you're going to need to call to basically set this up for the first time, connect with that backend, get the right credentials, and log in, right? So actually sending in the password and the user field, things like that. Now, one of the great things about this is once you do this in your application, once that user logs in, we're going to automatically attach the session token to all of the future calls, back for data synchronization, all of those things. So we're gonna connect, but you're going to be in full control. If you want to log the user out, you can still do that. But you're able to basically set up and then not have to worry about security on every single future call in the application. We'll be able to handle that for you. All right. So now we've got security set up, and we've got it initialized, and we have security set up. Now what we need to do is actually call back to that server for data, and this can be any data. And so we have basically FH Cloud. Again, I'll show you. It's easier just to show you up in the documentation, to be honest with you. Assuming it loads a little faster. There we go. So with FH Cloud, again, it's going to show you a lot of different options, or a lot of the different clients, and then it's going to show you the options, right? What's the path to the API that you're trying to access? How do you want to access it? And then the callbacks, right? Timeouts and things like that. And then how to handle a success and how to handle an error. And what's going to happen here is we have obviously different options for, or different coding examples for each of the different platforms. But what's going to happen on that call is it's going to be, because of the other things we did, it's going to be secured, and it's also going to be initialized so that we're capturing analytics. Who's calling what, how often, what kind of things are people after. All right. So next, I want to get to probably one of the really cool features of the client SDKs that we have, and that's our data sync and offline support. This is one of the feature sets that is hard to do and hard to make easy, and I think we've done a really good job of that. And so basically, what we're able to do is we can take any data set that we want, and we can make it managed. And if a data set is managed, then it's going to be synchronized back to the server, and any other clients that are using the same ID is also going to be managed and synchronized that way. So you're able to create data sets that you can then keep synchronized across all of your different clients through the backend server, which also is great when you're talking about offline support. So what we're able to do is queue up on the client side local offline events, and then when you get back online, we'll try to replay them, right? So this what you see here. Love this feature, by the way. The little pointer here is basically the architecture diagram for how data synchronization works, right? So when you have a managed data set, you're able to do all of these kind of CRUDL type updates on that data set, and then as part of the data synchronization client API, we have a local data cache and our sync service. Our sync service is going to say, if I'm online, send that change back to the server. That it's going to hit the server-side APIs for our data sync support and synchronize to a local data cache there. And every once in a while, through the data sync handlers, it's going to actually flush to the database. And you can control that. There's lots of different options there. As well as, like it says here, user-defined data access functions and different settings there. But the really interesting part is if you're offline, so if this tries to make this call, it knows you're offline, we're able to then store things into local storage on the device, kind of queue up the events that have happened. You're able to keep working still while you're offline. For example, if you're a telephone worker and you're way off the grid, that type of thing. You're still able to update a workflow or a work order or that type of thing. When you get back online, it's going to receive a notification, talk back to the server, and resynchronize that data. Now, I'm sure most of you are probably saying, but what happens if the data changed? Right? So you get a data collision. So you have to be able to handle data collisions, data synchronization collisions. And that's where we have different ways of resolving that. So there's different events that can trigger if there's a data collision. And it's basically up to us as developers how we want to handle that data collision, because every situation is going to be a little different, right? You can basically say, my changes overwrite whatever happened before on the server, kind of the other way. The server is always right, or you can have basically a custom handler that says notify the user and then change the data set in some way or reapply it, that type of thing. All right. So I kind of covered fairly quickly all the different client APIs, or quite a few of the client APIs that we have. We still have quite a bit of some other ones that are available and documented. And when this gets posted online, all of these links point out to the docs for the details there. We are going to talk in a little while about the push API as part of the unified push server, but we'll get to that. So next up, we're going to talk about the build farm that we have, and this is one of the areas I got really excited about. Who here is familiar with the Cordova push or the Cordova build farm that was part of the original PhoneGap? All right, so not many. So back when PhoneGap was PhoneGap, there was PhoneGap build, right? And then PhoneGap got acquired by Adobe, and there's still a PhoneGap build, but it's now part of it. It's an Adobe product. And it builds Cordova applications out in the cloud. And you can build Mac, you can build Android, Windows, that type of thing. But it's also only for Cordova applications, and it's proprietary. Now the build farm is something that we're going to be working on open sourcing and in the short term. And what we're going to be able to do is basically be able to build, and we already have in our product, I'll show you in a minute, the capabilities to build all of these different clients. Now we couldn't build all of the clients. For example, you'll see on Windows we only support 8.0. We only support 8.0 because there's actually licensing problems from Microsoft and Visual Studio that forbid us from basically being able to build Windows 8.1. Now with Windows 10, there were some changes, and we're hoping to add support with Windows 10 for the online build farm, but we're not quite there yet. So with the build farm, what is it? How do you use it? So you're going to code your application in the studio in your own IDE, however you want to do that. You're going to choose a device. And this can be done either through the platform, which you'll see in just a second, or through a tool that we have called FHC, so FeedHenry command line. And then we're going to build, basically set some options. Do we want to build a debug? Do we want to build a production build? That type of thing. And then we're going to send it out into the cloud. We have Mac and cloud and Linux machines and things like that. They're going to do the builds. They're going to return logs and a binary. Basically, it looks a little bit like this. There's a decision made about Cordova. If it's a Cordova app, what do you want to build? It's going to send out, and it's going to run through all of these, come back through, and you're able to see that in the studio. So why don't we just do that? So one more time, we'll pray to the demo gods and hope everything works well. Let's see, where was I? Here we are. So that project we had previously has now been fully created. And if I come down here and finish, I'm going to go and open up that project. Now, at this point, this project doesn't have any configuration. We haven't uploaded any certificates. If anyone's familiar with native push, especially with Apple, there's quite a few steps involved. You have to upload certificates. You have to handle different things. We have documentation and examples of all those. I'll get into some of that during the push part. So we've got all of these different aspects. Now I can go into one of these. I'll go in here. And this is basically our main app detail page. You can see a little preview of the application where that'll update live. You can change you can change the skins, but what's really neat, you can change what branch you're pointing at for these, and then change obviously all of the different settings here. So I'm just going to go down to build, and here's an example where you can build for any one of these. And I'm going to choose iPad. We're going to do master, because that's the only branch we have right now. We're going to use a credential bundle. Very secure password there. And I'm going to go ahead and build it. So the build is now started. You can take a look at the logs as it's going. And what it's doing is it's doing all those steps I told you about. It's figuring out, okay, where does it need to go? What servers need to be spoken to? And it's going to send all that metadata and the Git repo information, things like that out. Now, one really failed to build the binary. Oh, no provisioning profile. Oh, okay. So one second, I'll get back to that in just a second. So it's going to, not only is it going to send out to the different iOS or Android, that type of thing. It's also, especially with what we have in production right now, it's also going to be able to determine whether or not, based on region, if it needs to send to a different build farm. So we actually have redundant build farms, where if, for example, the North America, the NA build farm is down, it'll send to the EMEA instead. It'll be slower, but it won't be a disruption for anybody, right? And so it does that through different load balancers and rules and stuff like that. So the reason we got this error, right, and it's great, it comes back and says, hey, you don't have any provisioning profiles, so you can't do anything here, right? So instead, and this goes back to that kind of configuration with Apple, I have another project set up that I'm going to open that kind of already has a lot of the setup already done. And so here you can see the same page, but what I've done here is I've set a couple of things. I've set the bundle identifier, which is what's needed for Apple, so all the bundle identifiers need to be set. And then also, if we go down to push, I've already set the certificate in place so that the provisioning profile and all these other things are already happy. Right, and I've already got a couple devices set up, and you'll see that. So we'll jump over here and do this again, and hopefully this time it will work. So I'm going to build iOS. You can choose debug or production. Right, all of these have slightly different changes, and I'm going to go ahead and build this. So now you can see down here. It also shows you a history of your different builds, what you built it for. Was it Android? Was it iOS? You're going to be able to look at historical logs of the build process, and also download the different versions. So it actually keeps a history of your different builds, and you're able to actually log in and not log in. You're able to basically bring up this page and download older versions of the app. So if your QE department said, hey, this app is broken and you're already 2 versions ahead, you can load the old one. So now, because this is Apple, I can point over there, and it's just reading the QR code there. And I was going to have it on Reflector, but the network doesn't let the right ports open, so I wasn't able to. So I'm just going to go to that URL, and basically it brings it up and it says, hey, we'd like to install from the FeedHenry website the simple Cordova push app. So I'm just going to let it install. And then it's installing here. And what we'll see is that now it's installed. I can bring it up. And because this is a push application and it's configured as such, the first thing it's going to say, like all the games and everything else that you have and kids and all that, do you want it to let you send push notifications? So in this case, I'm going to say yes, because the demo would be kind of boring later if I don't say yes to that. And then I can close this. So you basically have a nice history of your builds, what branch it was built off of, which in the development cycle can be pretty useful. Right, and you're able to see this historical builds, right? So I'm really excited. We're gonna work on getting that open sourced, and I think it would be really great to have basically with some of my old laptops and an old desktop a little build farm running. I can just ship it jobs, right? And it can all be automated through the FHC tool as well, right? So, all right, let's jump back. We'll jump back to the presentation now. And we're going to talk about, right after I do this little dance that you have to do, we're going to talk about the unified push server. And again, this is one of the open source aspects of the platform. You can fork it up on GitHub. It's actually part of the AeroGear project. We'll talk about that in a minute. So first of all, mobile push notifications. Now at this point, I'm assuming most people in the room know what those are. That's the annoying things, or sometimes annoying things, that pop up on your device when your kids load too many apps on your phone and they starts popping and while you're in meetings and things like that. These are basically asynchronous notifications that are through the actual device vendors. So Apple, Google. So for Apple, there's APNS. For Google, there's Google Cloud Messaging, which was actually just deprecated at Google I/O a month ago, and it's been replaced with FCM, Firebase, the Firebase messaging, right? And then Microsoft has their own, that type of thing. Now, it's really great that these device manufacturers have this capability. You're able to you're able to send messages through their servers out to devices, even if the app isn't on. Right, you're able to push, there's been an update, here's a new job, whatever it happens to be. The problem is that each one of them have a different API, They have different procedures, and they change the way these things work every once in a while. And they all have to be managed by you guys, right? By the developers. And so that's really where the unified push comes in. But there's a few things you need to keep in mind when you're talking about native push. One is that you want to treat it a lot more like notifications than chat messaging, right? So as far as the smoke signals go. You also have to know that your users can turn them off. So you never, ever want to build a mobile application that requires push messaging, unless you somehow, through like MDM or something like that, can enforce they can't say no to those messages. So in general, don't ever, make it something. Don't ever rely on mobile push messaging. And then finally, if you annoy your users enough, they will uninstall it. And I've uninstalled apps that have just been too chatty, right? So it's just something you want to avoid. Now, this is where the unified push server comes in. This is a project. It's actually, like I mentioned, it's part of the AeroGear open source project. And it's fully integrated into the Red Hat platform. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. This puts all of the APIs, all of the settings into one console. There's one API for sending notifications. There's one, and then we have client SDKs that you use in iOS and Android and others for making it easy to kind of register the devices. And then you handle the push messaging just like you would normally on the native devices. And it's important to know that this isn't going through some other mechanism. It's still going through APNS, Google Cloud Messaging. We're just unifying how you interact with it and kind of managing those changes. So here's a diagram of basically how the unified push messaging works. What happens? We have client SDKs and server SDKs here, and as a developer, we're going to create our application, and we're going to write in that application the code that's needed for setting up the right server, public-private keys, right? Things like that are just part of the application, or part of the push messaging. Now, and then when a user installs that device, and it says, and you bring it up like I just did, and it says, do you want to allow push messaging? And you say yes. It does two things. It registers through the unified push server that it said yes and sends a bunch of metadata that I'll talk about in just a second, and then it registers with APNS or Google Cloud Messaging through that. So then at any time after that, you have server-side SDKs, and it's all REST-based. So you'll see in a minute, you can actually just send it a curl message, and it's going to receive a message. So you can use any system that can output or that can ping a RESTful endpoint. And it is secured though, so don't worry. You don't want to open that up and start spamming your users. So at that point, the unified push server gets a notification that says, hey, I want to notify everybody that cares about soccer or football that so the Irish, I'm sorry, that the Irish lost today.
England are right.
Okay.
Someone said on Twitter, it's only England could beat Europe twice in 1 week.
So basically, you're able to send that, and then the unified push server can go through and find all the users, Android, iOS, whatever it does. You don't need to care as a developer. All users that have said, I care about soccer, or I care about football, or whatever it is, and it's going to then batch up and send the jobs out to Google Cloud Messaging or Apple, and all your users are going to get that information. So, one more time, we're going to try a demo. Let me switch over. All right, it mirrored the wrong screen. There we go. It still mirrored the wrong screen. Just a second, guys. There we are. going to close down some of these. All right, so here's the screen we were on just a little while ago. This is actually the build one. But now I'm going to click on the push. And this one's already been configured, as I mentioned, right? So this one already has the certificate uploaded and the other information like that. And you can see, before I had 2 devices here. When I registered this, it actually registered another iPad, all right, into the system. And you can add different variants, and different variants are like there'd be an Android variant or a Windows variant, that type of thing. And I'm going to go ahead and send a push notification to everybody. I'm just going to say, hello, Summit 2016. And I'm going to send the message. So I don't know if you guys can see, but that just got a push message, and my watch actually just dinged because it's hooked up through that phone. The phone that's registered is mine, so it came all the way through. I'm able to see that here. Yep. Mm-hmm.
What is your, should you use MBaaS as provisioning for your different applications and devices, or is it just?
So, okay. So the question is, do you use MBaaS for provisioning and managing users and things like that, or do you use an MDM solution? Right. So I'm just repeating the question for the video. So the platform itself actually has integrated support for MDM providers. So as part of that, the build server or the build farm, at the end of it, it can actually send out to AirWatch, it can send out to Aperion and others, and actually send the app. And so that's a choice, right? If you want to use an MDM, it'll send the builds out there. With some of the support, it can pre-configure some things. You can tell it what profile to use, right? That type of thing. As far as how it impacts the push messaging, this is really for testing. This button here, this send notification. This is more of a development tool, not the whole thing, but literally that button for sending messages, right? Usually, this would be based off of you would use. In your own application, you would use, wow, that's a horrible color scheme for that. Sorry. You would use the APIs we provide. We have Node senders, Java senders, and basically be able to say, through the different options, send to X user, right? A specific user or a category of users or types of users or only to iPads. I'll show you that in a second. Or only to iPhones, or only to Android devices, right? And so it'd all be programmatic, right? You wouldn't. The button I'm using is more for development, testing and development. So while I'm here, I'll actually prove the whole curl thing that I was just mentioning. So we give the curl example. Go over here and send a message there, and my phone just dinged, so that worked. Why isn't it sending to my phone, to my iPad? Come on. There, I got 2 of them. So that's another really good point with native mobile push, is that it's not instant, and you can't, it is up to Apple's server on when it's going to send that message. And it's not even a guaranteed that you're going to get it. Right? So again, you wouldn't say, call 911 on a push message, right? Because it's not necessarily guaranteed. But on here, I actually got two messages that say hello from the curl HTTP sender, which is just the message that we have in that cut and paste, right? And we also, let me talk about the differences of kind of how you can send. So I'll say this is for the iPad, and you can choose by variant, which I said before could be Android, Windows. You can actually have multiples for iOS. You can have premium customers and non-premium customers. Aliases tend to be individual users, so that's your username, that type of thing. And then categories here. Categories is where and this is all programmatic, so you can choose we're not prescriptive, right? So this is where you could say a comma delimited list of, football, NFL, soccer, whatever, as a sports example. I care about these things, right? So you can programmatically set those. But I'm going to use device type, and I'm going to say iPad here, and it's going to send, and my phone shouldn't ding, and then this should, apparently in a second. All right, I'll try. We'll see if that pops in a second. Nope, not yet. All right, so I'll send one to my phone instead. And for that, so my phone just rang, or just to my phone, and I still don't have one to here. So I'm not sure why that didn't make it through, but like I said, it's going to be dependent on the Apple provider for sending that out. It'll probably, yep, it just popped in. So literally it just popped in. I wish I had this on the reflector, but like I said, I wasn't able to get that going on the Wi-Fi here. And then lastly, what we have is some analytics around push messaging. So I've only been using a couple of devices and sending some different messages and things like that. And how many push messages you sent, how many notifications have actually been dispatched. So this is how many times I said send a message. This is how many messages were sent, right? So it's more because I've sent to multiple devices at once. And then, fortunately, but the notifications opened isn't working, so that's something I'll have to look into. Basically, and I know this does work, but we'll have to figure out what's going on with this project, is basically what this does is it'll tell you how many people opened the application based on your push message, right? And that's a really useful tool for marketing and things like that. How effective was my push message? And then I think I already showed the activity. Oh, I didn't show the activity log yet. So the activity log is basically a history of every message that was sent and what was the different criteria that was used, right? So to my phone, device type is iPhone, right? And it also has things like time to live. You can send images, you can send different sounds, and that's all based on different support. Alrighty, and let's see. With that, I'm going to jump back over to the presentation. Yeah, sure.
So are you also able to push notifications based on the event
To a different. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So with that, what I'd recommend is Maggie Hu has a really great presentation where she actually integrated BRMS and business rules into the Red Hat mobile platform, right? And what that's doing is, I can't remember the exact use case, but it's something very similar where a rule, through the rule process engine, gets to a point and says, oh, something's going to happen, and it sends a push message out, right? So that's all very possible, but in this interface, there isn't a set the rule and that type of stuff. In the future, we'll probably have more integration with BRMS. Maybe you'll be able to say, if this rule matches, send, right? That type, but for now, that's through integration with BRMS. But it is possible for sure. And yeah, that's definitely a good talk to go to. I have it listed at the end. I have a bunch of talks that are coming up. Alrighty. One more time. do a little dance. Not singing the rest of that song. All right. So next up is I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is Red Hat. It's all about open source, and I wanted to talk about our open source initiatives around mobile so far. And we've got a lot more coming. But what you can do is you can check out our new FeedHenry.org website for new updates. So as a little bit of a background, some of you may know we acquired a company, FeedHenry, a couple years ago. And we've been actively integrating the teams and the technology, and it's been really good. And what we have is we're starting to open source different aspects of the project or into FeedHenry. So FeedHenry will be the open source community project for Red Hat mobile application platform product, right? And it, we'll keep adding to the list there. And if you go, for example, to the FeedHenry.org site. We've just launched a workforce management kind of sub-project called Raincatcher that's out, and that's why that's kind of prominently focused there. But it talks about the different things that are open source, how to get started, right? So different guides and things like that out to the open source. Some information out to GitHub and Twitter, Facebook, all those types of things, and as well as like our blog and community access. So we've got IRC, mailing lists, right? Things like that. If you're interested, certainly be happy to have you guys join those and then and take part in the community. So back to this one. Stop advancing. All right. So these are the main open source projects that we have at the moment. We have the primary FeedHenry one, where we have all of our client SDKs and our templates, so you can get in there and play with the templates and then re-upload them to the platform and try those out. And as well as our client SDKs, we're going to work on our Node.js SDKs, so getting our server-side Node.js APIs and things like that up to open source as well under Apache 2.0. And we also have the AeroGear project, which is a separate open source project, but it's all under one umbrella, where we have the unified push server and then some other experimental SDKs and examples and things like that. And then, as I mentioned, we have FeedHenry Raincatcher. Brian Leatham is going to be giving a talk on that later this week and kind of show you that whole process, right? So that's a set of node modules for implementing a workforce management type application on top of the platform. So that's where you have elevator repairmen, and you need to get work orders out, and they finished and run through different steps, get your next job, that type of thing. And then how can you try this now? You can go to the Openshift.feedhenry.com and basically register for an account, and you'll be able to get in, and with your OpenShift, your OpenShift account, be able to access the studio that you just saw, right? And then you'll be able to play with the templates and things like that. My only little word of warning there is the free or the default gear sizes in OpenShift is pretty small, so you can run out of some. Like if you try to do a really complex app there, you're going to run out of space, right? So that's where you can use paid gears and stuff like that through OpenShift. And then here's a listing of some other talks that are going on around mobile. So we've got tomorrow, Javier Perez, right over there, is going to be giving a talk on basically an introduction to our version 4 of the Red Hat mobile application platform. John Frizzell, right over here, our architect, is going to talk about mobile, microservices, and containers. All those things I said I wasn't going to talk about, he'll jump right into those. And then we've got a lot more. We've got transforming your enterprise. I'm not going to go through all of these; they're all on the agenda. But check these out if you want to know more about the platform and the program and stuff like that. And a couple of things I was asked to promote. We've got basically how to hook up legacy systems into your mobile applications, which is frankly a huge problem for most people, right? You've got these legacy systems, like banks still have things running in COBOL because nobody touches them anymore, right? So how do you hook up these legacy systems into new mobile applications? And that's what this this hands-on training, or not training, but this what is this called? Discovery session is going to cover, and that's on Thursday at 3:30. And then last up, the fun thing, our party is coming up. It's Thursday night or Wednesday night, and you can stop by our booth tomorrow when it's open and get invites. But it's basically mobile, middleware, and Openshift. It's going to be a big party, and get your invites there. So, last up, questions and answers, or questions. I'll try answers.
How much of this can be deployed in an on-prem? How much of this has to be cloud?
Right. So I'll encourage you to go to the talk that Javier is going to give tomorrow. Traditionally, FeedHenry was a SaaS-based offering, right? So it was all up in the cloud. Version 4 gets us closer to a full on-prem capability, right? So with version 4, and correct me if I'm wrong, shouldn't be, but with version 4, you're able to run basically. In fact, let me back up. It'll be easier to show here. All right. So with version 4, which is basically what this is showing, you're going to have the studio be in the cloud, but everything that your applications actually talk to can be on-premise, right? So that's your data, your communication, all of that can go through your on-premise infrastructure, right? Where the studio would be still in the cloud for now, right? So, excellent. Any other questions? Tomatoes? No? Last talk of the day. Everyone's ready to get out 5 minutes early? All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.